My name is Clara Bennett. I'm 30 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my family has treated me like a footnote in someone else's story. Not with cruelty, not with obvious malice, just with the quiet, consistent kind of neglect that's almost harder to name because there are no bruises to point to. My older sister Jess got the bruises, the good kind. The ones that come from being handled too carefully. She got the tuition checks, the safety nets, the cozy cushion of parents who said yes before she finished the sentence. I got told to figure it out, and so I did. I figured it out so quietly, so completely, that when I finally let them see what I'd built, nobody at that table knew what to do with their faces. They had no idea that 3 weeks before my parents' 35th anniversary dinner, I had signed a contract worth more money than my mother had made in the last 10 years combined. No idea that the design firm they called my little side project had just been handed a hotel chain account so large I'd had to hire 2 additional staff overnight. No idea that I had quietly purchased a commercial property in the Arts District of Nashville with my own money, no cosigner, no family loan, no help from anyone whose last name was Bennett. I sat at that table, listening to my sister describe her newest business idea, while my mother nodded along like she was hearing scripture, and I thought about all the times I'd tried to explain what I was building and watched their eyes glaze over. Then Jess looked at me across the centerpiece my mother had spent 45 minutes arranging and said, with the exact tone of someone doing you a favor, "Clara, have you thought about maybe just getting a real job? Like, a stable one with benefits? I'm just saying, not everyone has the personality to run a business." I set my fork down very gently. I looked at her, and I decided tonight was the night I stopped being the family's footnote. Growing up in Clarksville, Tennessee, meant growing up in a house where love was given out like a limited resource, and Jess had first claim. She was older by 4 years, louder by a mile, and blessed with the particular talent of always needing something at exactly the moment my parents had the emotional bandwidth to give it. She needed braces. She needed the school trip to Washington. She needed the car. She needed the apartment deposit when the first place fell through. She needed the tuition when the scholarship didn't cover enough. My parents didn't hesitate on any of it. They called it investment. They called it love. From where I was sitting, they were right, just not about which daughter they were investing in. When I got into a design program at a state school, my dad said, "That's great, honey," and immediately asked Jess whether she'd heard back from the private university that had waitlisted her. I paid for my own degree in installments, working as a server 4 nights a week, sleeping through lecture on Thursday mornings, and designing logos for local businesses on my laptop at the restaurant during slow hours. It took me 6 years to fully pay off those loans. I didn't miss a single payment. Nobody in my family knew that, because nobody in my family had ever asked. After graduation, I freelanced out of a studio apartment with a drafty window and a second-hand desk I'd sanded and painted myself. I built a portfolio working for small businesses who couldn't afford agency rates. I charged less than I should have because I was still learning how to charge for the work. I also started a separate notebook, not a mood board, not a client file, just a plain spiral notebook where I tracked everything: revenue, expenses, missed opportunities, things I'd do differently. I filled 3 of those notebooks before I felt steady enough to start calling it a firm instead of a freelance gig. Meanwhile, Jess opened a bakery with $40,000 from my parents. My mother called it an investment in her dream. The bakery lasted 11 months. My parents called that a learning experience. When I asked the following spring if they'd be willing to co-sign a small business loan so I could hire 1 part-time contractor and take on a commercial project I'd been offered, my dad sighed like I'd asked him to solve a math problem. "Clara, we just don't have the liquidity right now," he said. "And honestly, sweetheart, this economy, are you sure this is the right time to be expanding?" That was the only time I ever asked. The part-time contractor never happened. I took the commercial project alone, worked 16-hour days for 2 months, delivered it on time, and used the payment to quietly absorb the next project. Then, the next one. By the time I had 6 full-time employees and a lease on actual studio space, my mother still introduced me at church events as my daughter Clara. She does decorating. When my parents announced they were celebrating their 35th anniversary with a family dinner, my first instinct was to cancel. Not because I was angry I'd moved past the hot version of that years ago, but because those dinners always followed the same choreography. Jess would arrive with wine and a story, my parents would orbit her like she was the sun, and I would clear plates and make coffee and drive home feeling like a guest in my own family. But something had shifted in me recently. I'd spent 30 years being careful not to outshine anyone in that house. I had decided, recently, I was done being careful. I didn't wear anything special. I drove my same sensible sedan, and I brought a bottle of wine that was nicer than anything I'd usually bring, though nobody would know the difference, and I walked into the house smelling like my mother's pot roast and hearing my sister's laugh, already filling the kitchen like she'd rearranged the furniture simply by walking in. "She's here," my mom called, emerging with flour on her apron, which was theater, because she'd stopped actually baking things from scratch at least 5 years ago. She hugged me with the distracted warmth of someone who'd already given out their best hugs. "You look tired. Are you sleeping?" "You need to sleep, Clara." "I slept fine, Mom. You look great." Jess appeared from the kitchen doorway holding a glass of red wine and looking like a woman who had never worried about a utility bill in her life. She was wearing new boots, a fact I noted not with envy but with a particular kind of resignation that comes from knowing exactly who paid for them. "You made it," she said, hugging me in that sideways way she'd perfected that made the hug technically happen without actually touching. "How's work? Still doing the little design stuff?" "Still doing the little design stuff," I said. My dad was in the living room, tie loosened, watching college football highlights on a screen that was Jess's anniversary gift to them. A 65-inch television that she'd announced with a card and a bow, and that my mother had photographed and texted to. 3 separate group chats. I'd sent money through an app and a heartfelt note. Nobody photographed that. "Clara girl," my dad said, pointing the remote at me like a greeting. "Good to see you. You eating? You look thin." "I'm eating, Dad. How's the design business?" He always paused before he said it, like he was remembering the word from a list. I used to think it was age. By now I understood it was simply something he'd never quite filed under important. "Busy," I said. "Really busy, actually." "That's good. Stability is good." He turned back to the screen. We sat for dinner at the dining table my parents had owned since before I was born, with the same placemats my mother had been using since approximately 1997, and the good dishes that came out for holidays and milestones. Jess sat next to my mother. I sat across from her, next to my dad, where I'd always sat close enough to pass things, far enough from the center of gravity. The first 30 minutes were what they always were. My mother reporting on the neighbors. My dad's ongoing complaint about the new traffic light downtown. Jess describing a podcast she'd been listening to with the authority of someone who'd made the podcast. I ate pot roast and asked questions and laughed at the right moments and tried not to count how many times my name was said versus Jess's. Then my mother asked, the way she always did, that bright and slightly performative question. "So Jess, what's next for you?" And Jess set down her fork with the practiced ease of someone who'd been waiting for exactly this question, and said, "Okay, so I've been thinking seriously about a new venture, a wellness space. You know, like boutique fitness, but more holistic. I've been talking to a woman who has a space in East Nashville, and I think with the right investment, it could be really..." "Investment meaning?" my dad asked. His voice had a different texture when he spoke to Jess. Softer, more awake. "I'm still working out the numbers," Jess said, which meant she hadn't started. "But I think it's doable." My mother was already nodding. My dad was already leaning forward. The same posture they'd never once taken when I'd tried to explain what I did for a living. I looked at the pot roast. I thought about the contract on my desk at the studio. I thought about the closing documents sitting in a folder on my laptop for the property I now owned, free and clear. I thought about what my business partner Danny had texted me that morning. They signed. We actually did it. I should tell you what happened next, but before I do, drop a comment right now with what time it is where you are and where you're watching from. I want to know how far this kind of story reaches. What happened next started with the wine. After dinner, my dad refilled glasses, and my mother brought out a dessert she'd actually made this time. A pecan pie that had been my grandmother's recipe, and things softened the way they always do when sugar is involved. Jess was on her 3rd glass of red. She had that loose, generous quality that wine gave her, that I used to mistake for warmth. until I learned to wait and see what it turned into. "So, Clara," she said, resting her chin on her hand and giving me the look she'd been giving me since we were teenagers, the one that was technically a smile but functioned as a magnifying glass. "Are you seeing anyone? I'm focused on the business right now." Right, she nodded slowly. "I just worry about you, you know? Like, you're 30, and I know you love your little independent thing, but at some point you have to ask yourself if you're building a life or just building." "That's a good question," I said evenly. "I'm just saying, you don't want to wake up at 40 with a portfolio and nothing else." She laughed to show she meant it kindly. "You've always been so stubborn about doing everything alone. It's like you refuse to let anyone help you." "I've asked for help," I said. "It wasn't available." A small silence. My mother reached for her napkin. "I think what your sister means," my mom said, doing the translation she'd always done, "is that we worry. We just want you to be happy and secure, sweetheart." "I am secure," I said. "You know what I mean. Like, real, secure, stable." Jess set her glass down. "Do you even have a 401k? My dad chuckled. I don't know what it was exactly. The chuckle, maybe. Or the word stable said in that specific tone. Or just the accumulated weight of 30 years of that table and those chairs and that particular brand of loving dismissal. Whatever it was, it clicked something into place in my chest, and I felt not anger, exactly, but a kind of clarity that was almost like relief. "Can I tell you guys something?" I said. "Of course," my mom said. 3 weeks ago, my firm signed a contract with the Allerton Group. They're a boutique hotel chain. 12 properties across 6 states. We're handling the full interior redesign, rollout, brand identity, spatial design, all of it. Silence. "The contract value is $1.2 million. I said it the same way I'd say the weather. "It's the largest account we've ever had. We start February." Jess blinked. And last month," I continued, "I purchased a commercial space in the Arts District. It's where the studio will move once we renovate. I bought it outright. No mortgage." My dad put his fork down. "My mother looked at me the way you look at a room when you walk in, and the furniture has been rearranged and you can't immediately figure out what moved." "That's not," Jess started. "Real? It's real." I folded my hands on the table. "I have the closing documents if you'd like to see them." "Clara," my mother's voice had gone quiet. "When did this happen?" "Which part?" "Any of it, all of it. When did your business get—" She stopped. "We didn't know." "No," I agreed. "You didn't." My dad straightened in his chair. "Well, that's something. That's Clara. That's remarkable." "Why are you saying it like you're surprised?" I asked, and I kept my voice gentle, because I wasn't trying to wound anyone. I was just tired of absorbing shock that felt like an insult in a nice outfit. Jess had set her wine glass down and was staring at the center of the table. She looked like someone doing arithmetic. "How?" she finally said. "How do you even—" "The same way I've done everything," I said. "I worked. I kept records. I built relationships. I reinvested. I paused. I did it without a cosigner." The word landed. My mother flinched. My dad looked at the table. "That's not fair," Jess said quietly. But the edge in her voice was shaky. "Which part?" "You're acting like we had some perfect life and you had nothing. That's not how it was." "I know it's not," I said. "Nobody had a perfect life. But someone at this table got their tuition paid, and their first business funded, and their apartment deposit covered, and someone else was told the economy was bad, and maybe this isn't the right time. I'm not pretending that didn't happen. I'm just done pretending it doesn't matter." My mother's hands were in her lap. "We thought you were fine," she said softly. "You never asked. You never made it seem like you needed." "I asked once," I said. "Dad told me you didn't have the liquidity." Silence. The refrigerator hummed. My dad looked like a man sitting with something he'd been carrying for a long time and had just been told to put it down. He stopped. Started over. "We made decisions. I don't know if all of them were right. I didn't come here to make you feel guilty," I said. "I came here because I'm tired of sitting at this table pretending to be the version of me you're comfortable with. The small one. The one who does decorating." I looked at Jess when I said that last word. She had the grace at least, to look away. I'm not angry, I continued. I honestly am not. But I'm done being invisible in my own family. I built something real. I've been building it for 7 years. And I would have loved to share that with you while it was happening, but every time I tried, you changed the subject back to Jess. I looked at my mother when I said this. Not cruelly, just directly, every single time. My mother pressed her hand over her mouth. I always thought you were fine, she whispered. I thought Jess needed more, and you were fine without it. I was fine, I said. I made myself fine. There's a difference. Jess pushed back from the table. Not dramatically, not storming off, she just needed space, and the chair gave her some. So what is this? She asked. Her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. You came here to tell us you're rich now, and we can all feel bad? I came here because it's Mom and Dad's anniversary, I said. And because I keep hoping this family can be something more than a story I'm telling myself about why I don't come around much anymore. I looked at her. I don't need you to apologize for being loved. I just need you to see me. Jess's jaw moved. She looked down. My dad cleared his throat. Clara girl. He stopped. Tried again. I owe you something. I think I owe you a real conversation, and I don't know where to start with that. You don't have to start tonight, I said, but I'd like it if we started somewhere. My mother had started crying, the kind that didn't perform itself, that just happened, and she was trying to stop it and couldn't. We made you feel like you didn't matter, she said. That's what you're saying. I'm saying I matter whether you see it or not, I said. I've known that for a while now. But yes, for a long time, inside this house, it didn't feel like it. The rest of the night moved differently. The dessert was still on the table, and eventually we all drifted back to it, not because anyone was hungry, but because eating gives your hands something to do when there's nothing left to argue. My dad asked me actual questions about the Allerton group. He asked them carefully, like someone learning a new language, but he asked them. My mother kept touching my arm when she walked past, small reassurances she couldn't put into words. Jess was quieter than I'd ever seen her, and I didn't push it, because some things need to settle before they can be said right. I drove home that night with the windows cracked despite the cold, because I needed to feel something outside of that house, and the air was enough. In the weeks after that dinner, my family did what families do when the furniture gets rearranged. They tried to figure out where to stand. My mother called me 3 times in the first week. Not about logistics or holidays, just to talk, which was new enough that I had to remind myself it was real. She asked about the hotel project. She asked how Danny and I had started working together. She asked questions I would have given almost anything to be asked 10 years earlier, and I answered them, because I wasn't interested in holding a grudge over things I could spend the energy building instead. Jess took longer. She texted me once, about 2 weeks after the dinner, just a string of words that she'd clearly written and deleted several times before sending. I've been thinking a lot. I don't know how to have this conversation over text, but I want to have it. I wrote back, me too. Call me when you're ready. She called on a Sunday morning, and for the first time in maybe our entire adult lives, we talked for 2 hours without her making it about herself once. She admitted she'd known, somewhere underneath, that things weren't equal, that it had been easier to not look at it, that she'd told herself I was fine because I acted fine, and it had never occurred to her to ask if that was something I was doing on purpose. I made myself fine so nobody had to feel bad, I told her. She stopped. That's not okay. That we let you do that. No, I agreed. It wasn't. I'm sorry, she said. Just that. No qualifications, no pivots, no, and you have to understand where I was coming from. Just, I'm sorry. I'd been waiting my whole life for those 2 words from someone in that house. And when they finally came, they didn't feel the way I expected. They felt small and honest and real, which is maybe what apologies are supposed to feel like when they actually mean something. My dad reached out a few days later. Not by phone, he sent a letter. A real one. Handwritten on 3 sheets of yellow legal pad paper in his cramped, left-handed print. He'd always been better on paper than in person, and reading it I understood a few things I hadn't before. That he'd been scared of my ambition in a way he hadn't known how to name. That watching me do things without him made him feel useless rather than proud. That it had been easier to celebrate Jess because she asked for help, and asking for help felt like including him. He wrote, near the end, I think I confused needing you with loving you. I'm not sure I knew how to love you in the way you needed. I'm sorry I didn't learn sooner. I cried, reading that letter. Not because it fixed anything, but because it was true and he'd said it anyway. What I set in place after the dinner were not punishments. They were just facts about how things would work going forward. I told my mother I would answer personal questions about my life as long as she was asking because she was curious, not because she was lonely and I happened to be available. I told Jess that if she needed business advice, I'd give it freely, but I would not be funding any ventures. Not because I couldn't, but because money between us would change what we were building, and I wanted us to build something real for once. I told my dad I would come to dinners if they were dinners, not celebrations for one of us that the other one attended as an audience. They all said yes to the terms. I'm watching to see if they mean it. The Allerton project launched 3 months later. We did the design reveal for the flagship Nashville property on a Thursday, and I walked through those rooms. We'd transformed the light, the texture, the way everything breathed in the space, and I thought about the drafty studio apartment and the spiral notebooks and the years of figuring it out while someone else got the net. I thought about the server shifts and the sanded desk and the clients I'd undercharged because I wasn't sure yet what I was worth. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the lobby. I sent it to the family group chat with no caption. My mother responded with a heart. My dad wrote, "We're so proud of you." Jess sent back a single word. Legendary. I looked at that word for a long time. Here's what I'd want you to take from all of this. When a family has a favorite, everyone pays. The one who gets everything learns that love is something performed for an audience, that worth lives in being needed, and that the world outside will not always give them the standing ovation they expect. The one who gets nothing learns to need no one, which sounds like strength until you realize it's also loneliness. You can build an empire in the silence of being overlooked. I did, but you should know that the empire doesn't fill the part of you that just wanted someone to ask how things were going. Setting boundaries with the people who raised you isn't an act of war. It's the thing that makes a real relationship possible, and your value does not begin the moment they finally see it. It has been there the whole time, building quietly, waiting for the day you decide to stop being the footnote and write your own page. I built something real while they weren't watching. Whether they choose to see it now is a decision that belongs to them. Either way, I already know what I'm worth. Revenge Heat creates emotionally resonant fictional stories for entertainment purposes. This story explores themes of self-worth, family dynamics, and the long-term effects of favoritism. All characters and situations are fictional and intended to encourage reflection on healthy communication, personal boundaries, and the importance of recognizing your own value, regardless of external validation.